You're listening to Raceway Ministries Today. Thanks for joining us for Raceway Ministries Today. In just a few moments, we're going to give you the latest of what's going on in motorsports outreach through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. Well, we'd like to welcome you to this edition of Raceway Ministries Today. Thank you so much for being a part of our podcast. We are from the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and if you need more information about our Raceway Ministry work, you can visit our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, which is under the name of National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, or you can contact us by email. Our website also is racewayministries.org, and you can find a lot of information about us there. But thanks so much for listening today. I'm super excited today to have on the line Paige Johnson. Paige resides in Fishers, Indiana, although she's actually from South Dakota. She is the founder and the director of Speedway Racing Ministries. She has been very much involved as a fan and in ministry with NASCAR events, but now she is very, very much involved with the IndyCar Ministry there in the Indianapolis area, providing outreach and ministry to all the people who are there in the Indy community. She also oversees two very, very cool ministries on Facebook. One of them is called the Christian NASCAR Fan Community, and the other one is the Christian IndyCar Fan Community. And Paige most recently has become our newest member of the board of directors for the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and we are very, very excited to have her on board. Paige, I want to welcome you to the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on here.
Hey, listen, I am so excited to have you on, and we're very, very excited to have you as a part of our board of directors for NFRM. And I would like today to explore a little bit about who you are and what you do and what brought you into the world of racing. So if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about how your walk with Christ began?
Yeah, that sounds good. I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents followed Jesus, and they put us in Christian education, me and my sisters, and I always grew up knowing a lot about Jesus, but my personal relationship with Jesus started in 2011, shortly after my grandpa had died.
Okay.
And I began to rely on God through the grieving process, and I gave everything in my life over to Him with the help of my principal at my school. And then later on, when I was in college, I actually got the opportunity to go to Israel. And when I was in Israel, Jesus asked me if I was willing to follow Him wherever He would take me. And as I sat and looked across the Mediterranean Sea, just steps away from where Paul was tried in Acts, I said, yeah. And I committed to following Jesus wherever He would take me.
Wow, that's quite a story. You know, a couple of things that you mentioned there I think are so very important for people. I don't think we can underestimate the influence of being part of a Christian family. And I want to tell you, I really am thankful for your family and for them putting you in an environment of not only church, but even Christian schooling. Another thing that you mentioned there I think is very important. When we go through those tough times of life, sometimes those are occasions when God actually gets our attention and helps us to understand how important it is to have a relationship with Him. I'm saddened with you about the loss of your grandfather, and I understand how that kind of grief works. And sometimes people can go one of two ways. They can either get bitter toward God or they can listen to God speak. And it sounds like in that particular occasion in your life, God spoke to you and helped to nurture you along to follow Christ. And what an exciting thing about your call to ministry and your response to God's mentioning to you that it's time for a deep commitment. It's pretty cool that it happened over there in Israel.
Oh yeah, it was so amazing.
Well, listen, I'm so thankful that God got a hold of you and put you in His family and put you in His kingdom work because you have a lot to offer. You have a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement, and that has spilled over into the racing world for sure. Now, it's no secret that you are a big fan of Jimmie Johnson. All a person has to do is look at your Facebook page or just hang around you for a little bit, and it becomes very evident. You are very, very excited about racing and very excited about ministry in the motorsports world. I can recall a few years ago meeting you at Texas Motor Speedway, and how can I say this in a subdued way? You were extremely excited to be there at the race. I mean,
Yes.
You were like a hyper race fan, but your enthusiasm about ministry in the motorsports world was equal to your excitement about racing. The question that I have, and I've always been curious about this, how did you get involved with racing? How did racing sink its hooks into you? And how did you get involved in racing and ministry in the motorsports world?
Yes, I've been a race fan for most of my life. My parents, that was another thing that they instilled in me, was watching NASCAR races.
Okay.
And so I watched the NASCAR races with my dad, and then I started reading books about NASCAR. I really got into it. And then Jimmy Johnson, of course. And so then when I was in high school was when I started exploring the idea of being a pastor. And I was in Bible class, and I realized that there are a lot of ways that you can relate racing to Jesus. And so I started writing those down, and I started sharing them with people, and I would give my teachers our quizzes, and it was pretty fun. And so it was even a passion when I was in high school. And then I went to college, and the reason I chose Oklahoma Wesleyan University was because I knew that they worked at Texas Motor Speedway.
Okay.
And I wanted to go to the racetrack.
Oh.
And so I minored in marketing, and my marketing professor, Dr. Weaver, took me to the race for the first time in November 2015, which is when I met you.
Yes.
And I had heard that there had been campground ministries at the racetrack, but I had never experienced it. But I thought it would be the coolest thing ever, like if you could have church at the racetrack. And so my professor saw a sign for Texas Alliance Raceway Ministries, and he said, "Do you want to go see that?" Because he knew that's what I wanted to do. And so he took me over there, and I still remember it. Y'all were in a circle, and my professor took me to that circle of you guys standing there, and he said, "Go talk to him." And so I came and I started talking to you, and somebody said, "Well, you can come help us if you want." And the rest is history. And
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
I started helping you guys and at Texas, and I brought groups of students from Oklahoma Wesleyan and the School of Ministry to come and volunteer with Texas Alliance Raceway Ministries. And then once I moved to Indianapolis, I live in the racing capital of the world, and I started volunteering with IndyCar Ministry as their show car coordinator, and then developing Speedway
Awesome.
Racing Ministries out of that.
Wow, that is awesome. Now, I know that you have moved to the racing capital of the world, but don't you ever forget that Texas Motor Speedway is the great American speedway. Okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's the Great American Speedway.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I want to tell you, we were so grateful to have you and your group come and help us out there in Texas. And just y'all's presence and your extra hands to get involved in the work was very much appreciated, but your dynamic enthusiasm was very much appreciated as well. Although, I would have to say, there were times when we had to watch over our shoulder and make sure you didn't get out of hand. Well, listen, tell me about your move to Indianapolis. What has unfolded for you there with regard to motorsports ministry opportunities since you've moved into that area?
Yeah, so I moved to Indianapolis in June 2019, right after I graduated college with my ministry degree, to work with a church called Waterline, and the pastors John and Danielle Freed. And so when I was interviewed for my residency position at their church, one of the things they asked me was if you could do one thing during your residency that would be so fun for you, what would you want it to be? And without hesitation, I said, I've done some research. It doesn't look like the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has a racetrack ministry right now, and I'd really like to try and restart that.
Yeah.
And so they said, okay. And they have helped me really start my Facebook groups, and they helped me get connected in the racing community. And so some of the opportunities that have unfolded as I moved here, which have been really, really cool, are first, when I got here, I contacted IndyCar Ministry right away to see if there was any way that I could volunteer with them. So I have become the show car coordinator for them.
Great.
And last year during COVID, when there wasn't anything going on, I did data entry and helped with their online auction. But the show car ministry is their version of fan ministry at the racetracks.
Right.
So we bring our IndyCar show car and we recruit volunteers from the local churches to come and meet with fans and look for opportunities for prayer, faith conversations. And it's a really cool partnership between the local church and IndyCar Ministry. And I get to coordinate that. And then the first year that I was here before COVID, when they still had regular fan zones and regular fans at the racetrack, I went to the NASCAR race in September 2019 at Indy, and I got to preach with Brian and Susan Watts in the vendor ministry in the Joe Gibbs merchandise hauler, which is really, really cool. And then I've also met a lot of IndyCar people through IMS and just people who either work in IndyCar right now or have worked in IndyCar in the past, like on the safety teams and stuff.
Okay.
And I've gotten to develop friendships with them and just get to know them and the sport better, because since everything is very IndyCar here and I grew up a NASCAR fan, I don't know very much yet. So
Sure.
I'm still learning.
Well, I got to tell you, 2 or 3 things that you have touched on there are supremely important. I'm very excited to know that your church is connected with you strongly in the ministry. It's been a strong conviction of mine and ours in Raceway Ministries work for many years, that this is not just some independent renegade ministry organization or effort. It's basically an outreach arm from the local church, and we believe that ministry needs to be strongly tied to a supportive local church. So I'm very thankful that you have that going on. The other thing is connections. And, you've mentioned a couple of things, being in charge of the show car ministry, which is supremely important. But obviously, during the year 2020, that couldn't happen because of the COVID. And so you just simply picked up the baton and carried it where you could with doing data entry for those folks. A lot of people don't understand that sometimes you just have to do what you get an opportunity to do to make sure that ministry can happen in the future. You probably have heard stories like I have about guys who dreamed of driving a NASCAR race car, and they started off sweeping the floor in the shop and eventually worked their way up. Ministry is much the same way. You do what you can, when you can, where you have the opportunity, and then it grows from there. And faithfulness is the key, and it sounds like that's opened up some doors of opportunity that are going to shape the days ahead for you. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's been really fun being here, and all the people that I've gotten to meet and learn, and the support that I've had from Waterline and from the different people in the racing community too. It's been very, very fun to see.
You bet. Well, thank you for your connections with IMS and the IndyCar Ministry. We've been very, very eager to get a ministry restarted there at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so we're excited about what you might be able to open up there. What would you say is your vision for the future there in the Indianapolis area? What is it that you are really wanting to accomplish in the long haul, and what are the maybe not so distant future goals that you might have?
Yeah, so because of COVID and the unknowns that it's brought, I haven't really talked with the racetrack much about having a physical racetrack ministry there.
Sure.
Since there's been so much confusion about like whether or not we can have fans, and then what does it look like with the limited number of fans that could be there or could not be there. And will there even be campgrounds? Since we're located in the middle of the city, it's a little bit different than Texas, where there's all of this land around us and things like that.
Right.
So in the meantime, I've just focused on continuing to develop the relationships with people at the racetrack and people in IndyCar. But in the greater Indianapolis community, I think it's really cool that God's positioned us here in Indianapolis, because it is the racing capital of the world.
Yeah.
And wherever you're at, whether you're in a suburb on the east side or the west side or the north or the south or anything like that, everybody knows about racing in Indianapolis.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's ingrained into the culture. So there's a lot of opportunity for discipleship among race fans and among racing people. And IndyCar Ministry has already done a lot of that at the race shops with their Bible studies that they do.
Yes.
But I think it would be very, very cool in the future to have more race fan get-togethers with a faith focus and having those discipleship groups going.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think you're right on target with that. So my hat's off to you for all the work that you're doing there, and I pray that God will supply everything you need to reach those goals and more as we move into the days ahead. Now, one of the things that I've been very fascinated by is your fan communities. I mean, they've grown and they've expanded very rapidly. As of today, I think I checked it this morning, your Christian NASCAR Fan Community Facebook page has 425 followers or members. The IndyCar, the Christian IndyCar Fan Community, which you've only had for just a short period of time, is already up to 245 members. That just blows me away.
I know, it does me too.
Well, I think we ought to be blown away whenever God does great things. We shouldn't be surprised, but it should blow us away. But it does prompt some questions on my part. So I want to ask you 2 or 3 pointed questions about your communities that you've created on Facebook. And for all of our listeners out there, you really need to go to Facebook and go to the Christian NASCAR Fan Community and join and become a member. You need to go to the Christian IndyCar Fan Community and become a member of that as well. And I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. I think you'll find out a lot of good information, and you'll find a lot of great fellowship there. Now, Paige, for you, what is the appeal? What seems to be the genius behind the fact that you've created these community fan pages for these racing series fans, and they're jumping on it left and right? So what's the appeal, do you think?
Yeah, so I created these with the encouragement of my pastors, and when I started them, the goal was to create a space where we could follow Jesus together and enjoy racing together.
Okay.
And I started in the NASCAR one first, and that was the basic premise, was to follow Jesus together and enjoy NASCAR together.
Right.
And so I think it's morphed into the appeal, from what I've heard, is that both groups are genuinely relational communities, and it, especially during COVID, has reminded people that they're not alone in their lives, and they're not alone in their hobbies, and they're not alone in their walk with Jesus.
Right.
And it reminds them that Jesus loves them, and it integrates, their big interest in racing into something that's super important in their lives, which is their faith.
Okay.
And so I think that's one of the appeals. And then also, a lot of, some Facebook groups, promotion and selling and things like that. And here there's no agenda except to be friends and grow in our walks with Jesus together and enjoy the NASCAR races. And it's a positive environment. And so there's no negativity allowed, there's no political bantering allowed, and there's no curse words allowed. And so it creates a really positive, encouraging environment where people can be honest, and people can come when they need encouragement, or they need prayer, or they have questions. And that's what it's really become. Okay. So I think that's a lot of the appeal.
Well, all that makes perfect sense. And, honestly, the period of time that we've had with COVID and everybody being fairly isolated, perfect timing to start these communities. That's absolutely awesome. What can you tell me about the demographic of the folks who join up and become members of those community pages? Who are they?
Yeah, so I looked on the IndyCar one. The IndyCar group is still too new to give me any of the demographic information for it. Facebook goes like a month at a time, and it doesn't give you anything for less than a month.
Okay.
And it's not even a month old yet, and it's crazy how big it is. In NASCAR, the split between male and female is pretty even. There's 55% female, 45% male.
Okay.
And then over just about 57% of the members are middle-aged. They're 35 to 65, and the rest are either 65 and older, or they're under 35.
Okay.
And those two sides are pretty evenly split as well, but there's a lot of like the middle-aged typical NASCAR fan group. And then some of the bigger states that we have more members in are Indiana and Virginia and Texas. Those we have a good number of members in.
Okay.
And then there's also 12 people from Canada, which is really cool.
Good. That's very, very interesting. Well, one thing I've noticed about the pages, and I don't know if it speaks to the demographics so much as it might speak to just the comfort level that people have from a personal standpoint jumping into your fan community pages, but their honesty. For example, I was on the other day, and a couple of folks on there just mentioned some personal struggles that they were having when you offered, "How can I pray for you today?" And I was very intrigued by their honesty and their openness about some of the struggles that they're having personally that they would ask prayer for. To me, that speaks well of the atmosphere that you have created there. These people don't feel threatened. They don't feel boxed in. They don't feel like they're being beaten up with a Bible or anything like that. They feel very at ease being themselves. And you referred to that when you were talking about the appeal. And I think part of the appeal is these people can come there and they can be genuine and not know that they're going to be harassed for money or anything else. They can just come be a part of a fellowship group. What a great design that is.
Well, thanks.
What seems to be the biggest spiritual impact of the communities upon the people who become members? How does what you're doing with those communities seem to be impacting their spiritual walk with the Lord?
Yeah, so, there's 168 hours in the week, and a lot of times it's easy for us to spend one of those hours in church, and the other 167 hours we're off doing our own things, and it's almost like God or our spiritual lives can become an afterthought. But what I've found is that by using social media ministry and using these groups even to encourage people along in their spiritual journeys and give them access to a community of people who are coming alongside them in their interests and in their own spiritual journeys, it keeps the race fans engaged in their spiritual lives throughout the week, and it relates spiritual ideas to their interest in racing. And so, like on Sundays, we'll have devotionals that talk about, Jesus as your spotter, or how the Holy Spirit works in your lives, like changing your engine. When you become a Christian, God changes out your old engine for a new engine, and things like that. And so it integrates and contextualizes things that they'd always might have heard, at church or Sunday school into something that really interests them. And it allows them to integrate it into their daily lives.
Good.
And people in the groups have found good friends and community, and they pray for each other. And I've seen this especially in my Zoom Bible study that we do on Saturday nights with people in my NASCAR fan group. And we've all gotten to know each other pretty well, which is really fun to see throughout the week when they're on the group, like bantering back and forth, like in the race day chats, or even in our messages that we have going on in Messenger. People are finding real community on here. And especially when we weren't able to go out for part of last year, and we had to be quarantined, it was a really cool way to find people who have like the same drivers as you, or even different drivers, but you just get along so well that it doesn't even matter.
Wait. Does that mean if somebody isn't a Jimmy Johnson fan, they can still be a vital part of the community?
Yes. Any race fan is welcome. So you do not have to be a Jimmy Johnson fan, but if you are a Jimmy Johnson fan, I might love you a little bit more.
Oh, man, come on. Okay, all right. All kidding aside, listen, what you have going on there for people, whether they're Jimmy Johnson or Chase Elliott or whoever their favorite driver might be, what an exciting thing to be able to get them together and get them applying spiritual principles to daily life and things that they love. I think that's so important for people nowadays, really in any dispensation of time. So important to realize that spiritual principles and a walk with Jesus is not just for Sunday, it's for every aspect of your daily walk, even racing. So what an exciting thing. Well, now, Can you think of some ways that such a fan community idea could be expanded and implemented by other people?
Yeah, so what these like fan communities are different expressions of social media ministry. And I've been reading about this lately, and social media ministry is on the rise, and it can go from anything like live streaming your church service to groups like this where they're centered around a particular place or an interest or a people group. And to the current culture, I think it's one of the most effective ways that we'll be able to minister to people in the future, because everybody's on social media. And so within racing, like if you're listening and you're at a local track or you're a volunteer at one of the larger tracks, you could expand your social media ministry presence on your own personal page or even on the racetrack or the ministry page by creating posts that don't just communicate information, but they open up opportunities for conversation, because that's really what separates like just pushing out content to actual like social media ministry or interaction, is the opportunity to have a conversation, not just put out information.
Okay, gotcha.
If they wanted to create Facebook groups to keep up with people like at their local racetrack, or to engage with them on the weekends where there's not a race happening, or even people that come to visit your campground ministry at the racetrack, you can also invite them into like your Facebook group community as well.
Okay, good. For all of our listeners out there, we are visiting with Paige Johnson. Paige is the founder and director of Speedway Racing Ministries. She lives in Fishers, Indiana, not far from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And if you would like more information about how you might want to set up a fan community for your Raceway Ministries group or for your group of racing fans that you fellowship with, you might want to contact Paige. And Paige, I assume they can go to your Christian NASCAR Fan Community page or the Christian IndyCar Fan Community page and message you from those pages to find out more information?
Yep, you can find my profile on there. I'm the administrator on both, and so you'll see it. It's Paige Johnson, and you can send me a message through there. Okay,
perfect. I want to shift gears just a little bit and maybe zoom out a little bit and talk about the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the demographics in motorsports, particularly age groups, I'm wondering what the future is. You know, when you look at the corporate side of racing, and I've been around presidents and managers of raceways for a long time, they're always concerned on the corporate side about demographics. When it comes to ticket sales, souvenir sales, marketing their product, putting fans in the seats and so forth and so on, they always are longing to see a growing younger crowd. And obvious reasons for that. You know, I can remember when I first got into NASCAR, a lot of people were 60 and older. They traveled in their motorhomes, and then as we moved along through the years, those people began to retire and not be able to come to the raceway. And so the corporate side of racing is always looking at the younger generations to try to figure out how to get them involved. You know, bring the kids. We'll have kids activities. You know, we'll have special ticket sales for children, and maybe children get in free. They're always wanting the younger crowd there for obvious marketing reasons. And so when we look at motorsports in general and look at targeting folks under 30, what kind of expectations are in the minds and hearts of people under 30 regarding just the whole thing about racing, the fan experience, and even what ministry might look like? What are people, I'm not going to give your age away, but you're under 30, okay? And looking at it from your perspective, what are they expecting when they get to the racetrack, not only with the racing experience, but the ministry side of it? What are they looking for?
Yeah, so I think that the younger age range of the drivers is helping to improve the young fan base, because there are people, you know, I watch it and I go, oh, some of these guys are my age, or they're even younger than me, and it's wow. It's crazy to think that they're strapping themselves into a car, you know? It
really is. Well, you know, you look the other day at Ty Gibbs, you know, Joe Gibbs' grandson winning that Xfinity race. Man, he's what, 18 years old? You know, you look at him and you go, this guy is going around a racetrack at 200 miles an hour? Wow.
I know, and winning too. And so he's actually competitive, and he's younger than me.
Yeah.
And I think that helps pique interest. And then also, for me at least, customer service and fan experience are big things. And so having people who know what's going on at the racetrack and are able to help you navigate is very helpful. And then also making experiences accessible to race fans and finding ways to involve them in the weekend, because people are looking for those moments that they can post on social media to show their friends about the cool things that they're doing.
Okay.
And so whether, like, for example, at Texas before COVID, they did, if you had infield access, you have access to the garage during these times. And you could go in the garage and you could see people working on the cars, and you could snap a selfie really close to the car while people are working on it. And that's a cool picture to have on your social media.
Oh, yeah.
And then integrating other ways, like with technology, into the race experience. Like this year, when I went to the Roval, they had a trivia game you could play on your phone, and you could win $50 in merchandise for winning the trivia game. And so finding ways to incorporate technology and finding ways to create that unforgettable experience that someone could just share with a click on social media.
Sure.
I think those are ways you could engage like the younger people at the racetrack. And then in ministry, the social media thing plays into it as well. I've just talked a lot about social media ministry because I really think that that's an important thing for the future of ministry, because everybody's on social media these days. And so by engaging with people where they're at, then we can continue to integrate faith into the relevant areas of their lives and show them that faith actually is relevant to all of their life. And then at the racetracks, just being on authentic ministry, having authentic speakers, having authentic people serving, and being willing to listen to people as they talk, and providing that, safe, genuine space for people to be vulnerable and to feel like they can open up and actually create a new friendship.
Okay, that all makes perfect sense. I'm wondering, as you speak, you talk a lot about social media. What social media platforms seem to be working the best these days?
So Facebook is obviously still super popular, but it also has an older audience right now. So it caters well to, I don't know if it's the millennials, but definitely the generation above the millennials, which I think is Gen X.
Okay.
And then a lot of Gen Z, which is the newest generation, use TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram quite a bit. And they have those photo moments.
Right.
So they can snap a picture and put a quick caption on and show everybody how cool whatever they've posted is, and get likes from it and get interaction and communication from it. But Facebook, I read in a book, is actually the only true form of social media, because it's meant to foster relationships and not just push out content, which is what Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Twitter all do, is push out content.
Okay, well, that makes me feel a little bit better. Being 69 years old, Facebook is a big thing for me. I may not get too excited about Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and all those things, so that does make me feel better. But I would guess that all of those social media platforms would be important considerations for anybody that wants to reach all age groups.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Looking maybe beyond Indianapolis and Indianapolis Motor Speedway, what kind of plans do you have for Speedway Racing Ministries for the long haul?
Yeah, so our mission for Speedway Racing Ministries is to create moments where the race fans can encounter Christ through relationships and service. And then our vision is to lead race fans to become fully devoted followers of Christ, so that they can lead other race fans to become fully devoted followers of Christ. And so it's very discipleship oriented, and it's how can we take what used to only happen on the weekends through church and things like that and make it happen throughout the rest of the week. And so really integrating faith into everyone's everyday lives. And so the Facebook communities are really kind of the front door of Speedway Racing Ministries. They're the start. or the grandstands when you're at the racetrack. And that's where the faith foundation can be built and relationships can start forming. But we want to see people go even deeper into their walks with Jesus and into their faith journeys. So we want to bring race fans into different small groups, whether it's on Zoom or other race fans in their areas, like in those states that I talked about that have a lot of the race fans on my group. Have small group within those local communities that they can go to that integrate faith and racing and teach them about Jesus in ways that they can understand and are meaningful to their lives. And then eventually building up and training up race fans that can go and lead those kinds of groups in all of their local communities as well. And so it's leading them to become fully devoted followers of Christ so that they can continue to lead others in becoming fully devoted followers of Christ and accomplishing bringing God's kingdom into the world, you know?
You know, it sounds like a lot, and it sounds almost overwhelming when you talk about the magnitude of it, all the possibilities and all the potential, but it fits right in with the Great Commission that Jesus gave to us, and that is to go and make disciples. The thing I like about what you're doing, Paige, is you are pulling out all the stops to be obedient to God and take the Great Commission seriously and get out there in the racing world and make a difference. And I think that's exactly what God has called us to do. I'm so excited about everything that you have going on. Your enthusiasm, your vision, your obedience to God's call, man, I think God's got some great things in store for you.
Well, thank you. And it can be overwhelming, you know, when you think about it, especially from the human standpoint, but I know, like, when God looks at it, he looks and he smiles, and that's just one tiny little, like, snap of the finger for him. It's not overwhelming to him at all. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do through it. Absolutely,
yeah, no doubt. Now, one other thing. I know that all of that requires resources. You know, I've been in Raceway Ministries work for a long time, and I know that it costs money. I know that it takes, you know, you have to pay electrical bills, you have to pay cell phone fees, you have to put gasoline in your car, you know, you have to buy equipment if you're out there at the raceway on site. It takes resources to do it, and yours will be no exception. You know, a lot of your stuff is done online, but even though you do a lot of stuff online, you're going to be out there. And you've already been out there. You've been out there in the field. You've been out there at the raceways and the campgrounds and the infields. You've been on location where a lot of this ministry takes place, and that doesn't come free. So how can somebody support Speedway Racing Ministries? Is there a means and a method for listeners to be able to say, you know, I want to support Speedway Racing Ministries. I think I'd love to sit down and just send some money right now by PayPal or write a check and mail it somewhere. How can they do that, Paige? How can they support everything that God's put on your heart to do?
Yeah, so right now, if you'd like to donate to our ministry, you can make your check out to Waterline Church. And in the memo, just write Speedway Racing Ministries, and they'll designate it toward the racing ministry.
Perfect.
And then you can mail that to 13300 Oleo Road in Fishers, Indiana.
Okay. And what's the zip code there in Fishers?
46037.
Okay. All right. Good. And if they need to pick up that information as far as being able to look at it and write it down, can they go to your Facebook page, or can they go somewhere and find that information in print?
Yes, they can go to our Facebook page, or they can also look up on the Wesleyan website, wesleyan.org. Waterline Church's address is also on there.
Okay. All right. Perfect. And if all else fails, they can get in touch with you by your email address, pmjohnson48@outlook.com, or they can go to your Facebook page, Paige Johnson, or they can go to Christian NASCAR Fan Community or Christian IndyCar Fan Community and pick up the information they need there to contact you and then make a donation.
Yes.
Any other thoughts that you might have about your Raceway Ministries work, or any other thoughts that you'd like to share with those listening today?
So, I mean, it's an exciting time for racing ministry. And so if you would like to talk more about it, just, you know, send me an email or send me a message in all the ways that you said, and I would love to talk with you.
Again, for our listeners, we have been talking with Paige Johnson, the founder and director of Speedway Racing Ministries, and she has elaborated in detail for us on topics such as how she is planning to impact the motorsports world right there in the Indianapolis area. Her fan communities for both NASCAR and IndyCar offer plenty of opportunity for fellowship and interaction with other people who are race fans. Lots of things that Paige has had on her heart to share today, and we're so grateful for Paige. And Paige, thank you for taking the time to visit with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And to all of our listeners out there, thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Raceway Ministries today. And our prayer, as always, is that you will have a great time speeding around the road course of life, and one day we'll see you in victory lane. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Well, thanks so much for tuning in for today's podcast. We'll look forward to having you join us for the next edition of Raceway Ministries Today.